Shalom and welcome back to B'nai Noach Academy, Thoughts on the Torah. Please remember to hit the like button and to subscribe, and of course, to share this wisdom and inspiration with friends and family. If you look in the book of Exodus, chapter 38, verse 8, it says, he made the laver, which is like the wash basin of copper, and its stand of copper from the mirrors of the women who performed tasks at the entrance of the tent of meeting. What exactly is this all about? We know that when the call went out to make the contributions for the holy temple, that is the tabernacle, everybody came. People brought gold, silver, copper, precious gems, materials, the wood, whatever it is, they brought them. But here is something specific that has never been mentioned yet. And it tells us that this wash basin was brought from specifically the mirrors that the women brought. What are these mirrors? Now, the mirrors in those days were made out of copper. They would polish them and they would glow. And that's what they would use to look into and to, I guess, pretty themselves, for vanity purposes. What is the Torah telling us with this, and what is the lesson for us? Well, the sages tell us that something transpired. Something happened in the background that's not actually spelled out here, but it's hinted to here. We're alerted to this. And that is that when the women came and they donated their copper mirrors, Moshe refused to accept it. Moshe actually felt that it was wrong. It was not the proper type of gift for such a holy endeavor. He felt like these mirrors are designed, are designated. The virtue of the fact that these mirrors are made for one to be indulgent in their own vanity, in something which is so superfluous, so material, so opposite of what he felt this holy entity, this holy edifice was being designed for. And therefore, he felt like it's not befitting, it's not appropriate to use these mirrors, to melt down this copper in order to build this holy edifice. And God said to him, no, in fact, these are so special to me. These are so precious to me. And in fact, what was constructed specifically with that copper, with the copper that came from the mirrors of the Jewish women, what was constructed with it? The wash basin, that which was used as the prerequisite, as the opening for all the service in the Holy Temple. In other words, without it, without the priests washing their hands and feet from this wash basin, they could not perform any of the holy service. In fact, if they did perform any of the holy service without washing their hands and feet from this basin, from this wash basin, they would have actually been liable to the extent that they can be put to death. This tells us something very important. What was special about these mirrors? Why did God like him so much? Well, in the most difficult and challenging of times, when the Jewish people were enslaved in Egypt, the men were out there in the fields and they were not even allowed to go home. Even if they were allowed to go home, they didn't have the strength to drag themselves home. They did not have the ability, they didn't have the desire to continue on with life. But the women had the foresight, and the women understood that if they don't do something, if they don't make it happen, then there isn't going to be a continuum for the Jewish people. There isn't going to be a continuum for that generation. And what they did was they would go out into the fields and bring food to their husbands and bring these mirrors and make themselves look pretty. And then they would entice their husbands. And thus this brought about that there should be a continuation. There should be a reproduction of the people. And that's where they went. By the time they left Egypt with swarms, so to speak, of children that were born as a result of this. And God says, this is so precious to me. This is something very special. Yes, it came from vanity, but this vanity was used. This vanity was purposed for a very holy purpose. And therefore, this is actually even holier than all the other donations that are just coming from a very neutral source. This is even more holy than them. And therefore, all the service of the temple has to begin with this basin, with the water that comes from this wash basin. Otherwise, you cannot continue, you cannot go on with the service. And this tells us something very important. In life, it's not about, what the act is. It's about what the act leads to. It's not always about the actual thing. Somebody can be putting on, say, for example, a woman can put on makeup, and it can be the most virtuous of things, or God forbid, the opposite. It depends on what the purpose is. It depends what it's going to lead to. In this case, we see so beautifully how their action, although on the surface seems to be pure vanity, but yet this was the holiest of things that God himself says to Moses, I cherish these mirrors.